The unexpected arrival. The gleaming lights of the luxury car showroom bounced off the polished vehicles, each one looking more pristine than the last. The air smelled of fresh leather and the faint tang of industrial cleaner, mingled with a sense of exclusivity that seemed to hang over the place like a badge of honor. Customers, dressed in tailored suits and elegant dresses, strolled between the cars, chatting with salesmen in crisp uniforms. The showroom felt like an elite club where only those with the means and the status belonged. A sharp chime echoed as the glass doors slid open. Heads turned briefly, then quickly turned away when the new arrival stepped in. A man in his late 30s, wearing a faded black t-shirt, jeans with frayed hems, and sneakers that had clearly seen better days, walked in with a calm and steady stride. His unassuming appearance contrasted starkly with the opulence around him. The man paused at the entrance for a moment, his eyes scanning the cars with a thoughtful gaze. Despite his modest attire, his posture exuded quiet confidence. He made his way to the receptionist desk, where Sophie, a kind-looking woman in her mid-40s, greeted him with a professional smile. "Hello, sir," Sophie began, her voice warm but cautious. "How can I assist you today?" "I'd like to buy a car," the man said simply, his voice steady but devoid of arrogance. His word hung in the air like an unexpected declaration in a quiet room. Sophie blinked, momentarily taken aback. "Of course," she replied, recovering quickly. "Please have a seat, and I'll get someone to assist you." Before she could call anyone, a salesman named Tim approached, his ears perked up by the oddity of the situation. Tim was one of the more experienced staff members, but his overconfidence and penchant for making quick judgments often rubbed people the wrong way. "A car, huh?" Tim said with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. He gave the man a once-over, his gaze lingering on the worn-out sneakers. "You're in the right place, but are you sure you're not lost?" The man's expression remained unchanged. "I'm sure," he said. Tim's grin widened as he crossed his arms. "All right, what kind of car are you looking for?" The man pointed toward the center of the showroom. There, under a spotlight, sat the star of the collection, a bright red sports car with sleek lines and a design that screamed wealth and power. It was the Speedstar X9, a model so exclusive that only a handful were sold each year. Its price tag of $300,000 made it a dream for most and a reality for only a select few. "That one," the man said calmly. Tim burst out laughing. His laughter echoed through the showroom, drawing the attention of other salesmen and a few curious customers. "The Speedstar X9. Do you have any idea how much that costs?" The man nodded. "Yes. I'd like to pay in cash." The laughter grew louder. Another salesman, who had been watching from the sidelines, chuckled and leaned toward his colleague. "This guy's hilarious. Thinks he can walk in here and buy a Speedstar with pocket change." Tim, still chuckling, decided to play along. "All right, Mr. Millionaire," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Let's see the cash." The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a slim wallet. From it, he produced a single credit card and a folded piece of paper. He handed the paper to Tim, who opened it with an exaggerated flourish, expecting a joke or perhaps a scribbled IOU. Instead, Tim froze. His eyes scanned the paper, his smirk fading as confusion took its place. What is this?" he stammered. The man remained calm. "It's my bank statement." Tim's eyes darted across the numbers on the page. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, but no words came out. Finally, he managed to croak, This says you have billions." A murmur swept through the showroom as other salesmen craned their necks to see what had silenced Tim. Sophie, who had been watching the scene unfold from her desk, felt a pang of regret. She approached the man cautiously. "Sir," she said softly, "I'm sorry for the way you've been treated." The man turned to her, his expression softening. "No need to apologize. Sometimes people reveal their true selves when they think you're nobody." Sophie frowned, his words resonating with her. She wanted to ask more but hesitated, unsure if it was her place. Meanwhile, Tim, still clutching the bank statement, stumbled backward. This must be fake," he muttered, trying to regain his composure. He turned to his boss, Mr. Jacobs, who had been watching the commotion from a distance. "Boss," Tim called out, waving the paper, "you need to see this." Mr. Jacobs, a sharp-dressed man in his 50s with a reputation for being a shrewd businessman, approached with a measured stride. He took the paper from Tim and examined it. His reaction was almost identical to Tim's: shock, disbelief, and then a dawning realization. "Is this real?" Mr. Jacobs asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The man nodded. "It is." Tim, now visibly sweating, tried to recover. "Look, sir, I didn't mean to." The man raised a hand, silencing him. "I'm not here for apologies," he said. "I'm here to buy a car." "Now, can we get back to that?" Mr. Jacobs straightened up, his demeanor shifting instantly. "Of course, sir," he said, his tone now respectful, almost deferential. "Please, let's sit down and discuss the details." As the man followed Mr. Jacobs toward his office, the showroom fell silent. The other salesmen exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier mockery now replaced with regret and embarrassment. Sophie watched the man disappear into the office, her mind replaying his words. "Sometimes people reveal their true selves when they think you're nobody." In that moment, she realized this wasn't just about selling a car. This was a lesson in humility, in kindness, and in the dangers of underestimating someone based on appearances. The revelation. As the office door closed behind the man and Mr. Jacobs, the once bustling showroom grew quieter. Customers had resumed their browsing, though whispers still circulated about the unassuming visitor who had shocked the sales team. Meanwhile, the salesmen huddled in small groups, exchanging nervous glances and muttering their regrets under their breath. Sophie, seated at her desk, couldn't shake her curiosity. She had seen her share of wealthy customers walk through those glass doors, but none like this man. He carried himself differently, humble yet confident, simple yet enigmatic. She watched the closed office door, wondering what kind of conversation was unfolding inside. Inside the office was impeccably designed, with dark mahogany furniture, a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city, and a faint scent of expensive cologne. Mr. Jacobs gestured for the man to sit on a plush leather chair across from his desk. "Thank you," the man said politely as he sat down, his composure unshaken. Mr. Jacobs took his seat behind the desk, the bank statement still in his hand. His demeanor was now formal and respectful, a stark contrast to the mocking tone his staff had displayed earlier. "I must admit, sir," Mr. Jacobs began, carefully choosing his words, "we don't often see someone like you walk into our showroom without prior arrangements. If I may ask, what brings you here today?" The man leaned back slightly, his gaze steady. "I'm in town for a short while and decided to stop by. I've admired the Speedstar X9 for some time and thought today would be the day I finally own one." Jacobs nodded, though he couldn't suppress his curiosity. "Forgive me for being forward, but most of our clients in your financial position usually have representatives or assistants handle these matters. It's rare to see someone of your status come in personally." The man chuckled softly. "That's precisely why I came myself. I wanted to experience it firsthand without any filters." Jacobs tilted his head, intrigued. "You prefer a direct approach?" "Always," the man replied. "It reveals more about the people you interact with." Jacobs cleared his throat, recalling the earlier mockery from his staff. "I assure you, sir, this isn't how we typically conduct ourselves. You have my deepest apologies for any misunderstandings." The man smiled faintly, but didn't respond. Instead, he shifted the conversation. "About the car. What do I need to do to finalize the purchase?" Jacobs leaned forward, eager to smooth things over. Well, the Speedstar X9 is one of our most exclusive models. It's fully customizable, and we offer a range of add-ons and personalized features. I can have our top specialist work with you to tailor it exactly to your liking. Perfect, the man said. But there's one condition. Jacobs raised an eyebrow. And that is, I'd like to deal with Sophie, the man said. Sophie, Jacobs repeated, surprised. Yes, the man confirmed. She treated me with kindness and respect, even when others didn't. I'd like her to handle the sale. Jacobs hesitated. Sophie was the receptionist, not a salesperson. But given the man's wealth and his potential as a long-term client, he wasn't about to argue. Of course, Jacobs said quickly. I'll bring her in. Back in the showroom. Sophie's heart raced when Mr. Jacobs approached her desk. His expression was unreadable, but his tone was unusually polite. Sophie, could you step into my office? Our guest has requested to work with you directly. Me? Sophie asked, startled. Yes, Jacobs said. Please, come with me. As Sophie followed him to the office, the salesman exchanged puzzled looks. Tim, still shaken from the earlier encounter, muttered, Why her? Inside the office, the man stood as Sophie entered. Thank you for coming, he said warmly. Please, have a seat. Sophie sat down, feeling out of place in the luxurious office. How can I help you, sir? I'd like you to handle my purchase, the man said. Mr. Jacobs will assist if needed, but I'd prefer you to take the lead. Sophie glanced at Jacobs, who gave her a slight nod. Gathering her courage, she turned back to the man. All right, sir. Let's go over the details. For the next hour, Sophie guided the man through the customization options for the Speedstar X9. He asked thoughtful questions, his interest genuine. Despite his immense wealth, he wasn't extravagant in his choices, opting for subtle elegance over flashy features. As they wrapped up, Sophie asked, Will you be paying the full amount upfront, or would you like to finance? Upfront, the man said without hesitation. I'll transfer the funds immediately. Jacobs interjected. We can process that for you, sir. Sophie will ensure everything is in order. The man stood and extended his hand to Sophie. Thank you for your help. I appreciate your professionalism. Sophie shook his hand, her nervousness replaced by a sense of pride. It's been a pleasure, sir. The departure. When the man stepped out of the office, the salesman fell silent, their earlier arrogance replaced by a mix of awe and regret. Tim, his face pale, managed a weak smile. Sir, if there's anything else we can do for you. The man paused, looking at Tim with an unreadable expression. Perhaps, he said, you should focus on treating every customer with respect. You never know who they might be. With that, he walked to the exit, leaving a stunned silence in his wake. Sophie followed him to see him off. Sir, she said softly as they reached the door, thank you for choosing me. I don't know what to say. Just keep being yourself, the man replied. The world needs more people like you. As the glass doors slid shut behind him, Sophie watched him walk away, a new sense of purpose blossoming in her chest. Back in the showroom. After the man left, Jacobs called an impromptu meeting. He didn't mince words. Let today be a lesson for all of us, he said sternly. We represent this dealership, and we will treat every person who walks through those doors with respect, no matter their appearance. The salesman nodded, their earlier bravado replaced by humility. Tim, in particular, avoided eye contact with Sophie. Sophie, still processing everything, returned to her desk. She didn't know if she'd ever see the man again, but his words stayed with her. The world needs more people like you. For the first time in years, Sophie felt truly valued, not just by the wealthy man but by herself. To be continued. Would you like me to proceed with part 3? The lesson. The showroom buzzed with an uneasy energy after the man's departure. Despite Mr. Jacobs's stern words during the impromptu meeting, the air was thick with tension. For the salesman, especially Tim, the day had been a stark reminder of how easily appearances could deceive. Sophie, meanwhile, tried to carry on with her duties, though her thoughts often drifted back to the man's parting words. Tim's reflection. Tim sat at his desk, staring at the empty coffee cup in his hand. The usually boisterous and confident salesman was uncharacteristically silent. His mind replayed the scene over and over, his mocking laughter, the man's calm demeanor, and finally, the jaw-dropping moment when the bank statement revealed the truth. "How could I have been so blind?" Tim muttered to himself. He had always prided himself on being a good judge of character, but today he had let his biases guide him. His face burned with embarrassment at the memory of his colleagues laughing alongside him, egged on by his arrogance. "Tim," a voice broke through his thoughts. It was Mr. Jacobs. "A word in my office." Tim rose, his stomach churning. He knew this wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. In Mr. Jacobs's office, Mr. Jacobs sat behind his desk, his sharp gaze fixed on Tim. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite him. Tim obeyed, his palms sweating. "Tim," Jacobs began, his tone measured but firm, "do you understand what went wrong today?" Tim hesitated. I judged him." "Sir, I made assumptions." Jacobs nodded. "And what did those assumptions cost us?" Tim swallowed hard. "Our reputation, respect, and potentially a long-term relationship with a high-value client," Jacobs added. "Do you think someone like him will forget how he was treated here today?" Tim shook his head. "No, sir." Jacobs leaned forward. "Let this be a lesson. Tim, respect and humility are not optional in this business. You don't just sell cars, you build trust. And today, you failed at that." Tim nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "I understand." "Good," Jacobs said. "Now, I want you to apologize to Sophie. She handled the situation with grace and professionalism, while you made a fool of yourself." Tim's head shot up in surprise. "Apologize to Sophie?" "Yes," Jacobs said firmly. "She stepped up where you fell short. And if you're smart, you'll learn from her." Sophie's rising confidence. Meanwhile, Sophie sat at her desk, reflecting on the day's events. The man's kindness and the trust he had placed in her left a profound impact. For years, she had worked as a receptionist, often overlooked and underestimated. But today, she had been given an opportunity to shine, and she had risen to the occasion. Her thoughts were interrupted by Tim's hesitant voice. "Sophie, can we talk?" She looked up, surprised. "Of course." Tim shifted uncomfortably, his usual confidence nowhere to be found. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I was out of line earlier. You handled everything so much better than I did." Sophie blinked, caught off guard by his sincerity. "Thank you, Tim. That means a lot." Tim nodded, relief washing over his face. "I'll do better. I promise." As he walked away, Sophie felt a sense of vindication. For the first time, she wasn't just the receptionist. She was someone others could learn from. The ripple effect. The following days saw a noticeable change in the showroom. The salesman, chastened by the incident, made a conscious effort to treat every customer with respect. Sophie, once relegated to the background, found herself being consulted more often. Mr. Jacobs even hinted at the possibility of a promotion. But the biggest surprise came a week later, when a courier arrived with a package addressed to Sophie. It was a sleek black box with a handwritten note attached. The note read, "Dear Sophie, thank you for your kindness and professionalism. You reminded me that true character shines brightest in unexpected moments. Please accept this as a token of my gratitude. Warm regards, a friend." Inside the box was a beautiful gold wristwatch, simple yet elegant, with an engraving on the back, "Stay true." Sophie's eyes welled up as she read the engraving. She wore the watch with pride, a daily reminder of the man who had changed her perspective. The man's return. Months passed, and life at the dealership settled into a new rhythm. Sophie had been promoted to customer relations, a role that allowed her to interact with clients directly. The salesman treated her with newfound respect, and even Tim had become noticeably humbler. One afternoon, the familiar chime of the glass doors opening drew Sophie's attention. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw the man walk in, this time dressed in a tailored navy suit. Though his attire was different, his calm demeanor remained the same. Sophie approached him with a smile. "Welcome back, sir. It's good to see you." "It's good to be back," the man replied. "How's the Speedstar X9 treating me?" "Your car?" Sophie asked, confused. The man chuckled. "I had it delivered to a friend. I actually came back to look at something else." Sophie led him to the luxury SUV section, where they discussed options. Unlike his previous visit, there was no mocking laughter or dismissive behavior from the staff. The man noticed the change and smiled knowingly. As Sophie finalized his purchase, the man leaned in and said softly, "You've made quite the impact here, haven't you?" Sophie smiled back. "Thanks to you." The man shook his head. "No, thanks to yourself. You had it in you all along." The lesson endures. As the man drove off in his new car, Sophie watched from the glass doors, her heart full. The man's visit had been more than a sale. It had been a lesson in humanity. And while the man's wealth had shocked them all, it was his character that left the deepest impression. Back inside, Sophie adjusted the gold watch on her wrist and returned to her desk, ready to greet the next customer with the same warmth and respect she now knew could change lives. The ripple expands. Months passed since the enigmatic man first stepped into the dealership, leaving behind a lesson that rippled through the lives of everyone he encountered. The incident had become a quiet but enduring legend among the staff, serving as a reminder of the power of humility and kindness. Sophie, now in her new role as customer relations manager, flourished in her responsibilities. Yet, her journey of growth was far from over. A fresh start for Tim. Tim had undergone a transformation since that fateful day. Once cocky and dismissive, he now made a conscious effort to engage with every customer respectfully, regardless of their appearance. His sales numbers, while consistent, no longer defined his self-worth. Instead, he found joy in genuinely connecting with clients. One rainy afternoon, as Tim was showing a middle-aged couple around the mid-range SUVs, he noticed Sophie walking past. He excused himself briefly and approached her. "Sophie," he began hesitantly, "I just wanted to thank you." Sophie tilted her head, puzzled. "For what?" "For setting an example," Tim admitted. "You showed me what it means to really listen to people and treat them with dignity. It's changed the way I work. And honestly, the way I live." Sophie smiled warmly. "I'm glad to hear that, Tim. Everyone deserves to be treated with kindness." Tim nodded. "You know, I don't think I ever told you, but that man, he wasn't just a customer. He was a wake-up call." Sophie's smile faded slightly. "He was more than that. He was a teacher. The mystery man's impact." The dealership wasn't the only place transformed by the man's actions. Word of the incident had spread, reaching other luxury car showrooms in the area. Stories of the billionaire who dressed like an average Joe, and the lessons he imparted, sparked conversations about customer service and the importance of humility in the industry. One day, Sophie received an invitation to speak at a regional sales conference. The topic: Customer Experience Beyond Appearances. Initially hesitant, Sophie eventually agreed, encouraged by Mr. Jacobs and her colleagues. Sophie's speech. The conference was held at an upscale hotel in the city, drawing attendees from dealerships across the region. Sophie, dressed in a simple but elegant navy suit, stood nervously backstage, clutching her notes. When her name was announced, she took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. The audience's applause was polite but expectant. Sophie began her speech by recounting the story of the mysterious man who had visited their dealership months ago. She described the laughter, the mocking, and the eventual shock when his wealth was revealed. "But this story isn't about money," Sophie said, her voice steady and clear. "It's about something far more valuable: character. That man didn't teach us about sales. He taught us about humanity. She paused, scanning the audience. How many times do we judge someone based on their appearance? How often do we let our biases shape our actions? That day, I learned that true success isn't just about selling cars. It's about building trust, showing respect, and treating every person as if they matter. Because they do. The room was silent as Sophie continued, sharing how the incident had transformed the dealership's culture and her own perspective. By the time she finished, the applause was thunderous. Sophie left the stage feeling lighter, as if she had finally repaid the man for the lesson he had taught her. The return of Mr. Brooks. Back at the dealership, another surprise awaited. Mr. Brooks, the owner of the dealership chain and a man rarely seen by his employees, made an unannounced visit. His imposing presence commanded attention as he entered the showroom. "Sophie," he called, his voice deep and authoritative. She hurried over, wondering what had prompted his visit. "Yes, Mr. Brooks. I heard about your speech," he said. "Well done. You've put this dealership and our brand in a positive light." "Thank you, sir," Sophie replied, humbled by the praise. Mr. Brooks nodded but then leaned in slightly, his tone softening. "That man you spoke about, he called me." Sophie's eyes widened. "He did?" "Yes," Brooks said. "He commended your professionalism and asked if you were being recognized for your efforts. I told him about your promotion, but he suggested something more." "What do you mean?" Sophie asked, her heart pounding. Mr. Brooks smiled faintly. "He suggested we create a new role, Customer Experience Ambassador, for the entire chain. And he recommended you for the position." Sophie was speechless. The role Mr. Brooks described was unlike anything she had imagined for herself. It involved traveling to other dealerships, training staff, and ensuring that every customer, no matter their background, was treated with respect and care. "Do you accept?" Brooks asked, his tone expectant. "Yes," Sophie said, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'd be honored." A new journey. Sophie's new role took her across the country, where she shared her story and trained hundreds of employees. She became a symbol of the values the mysterious man had exemplified: kindness, humility, and respect. During one of her trips, she received an unexpected call. It was from the man himself. "Hello, Sophie," his familiar voice greeted her. "Hello, sir," Sophie replied, unable to hide her excitement. "How can I help you?" "You've already helped me," he said. "I've been following your progress. You've taken a simple encounter and turned it into something extraordinary." "It's all because of you," Sophie said. "No," he corrected gently. "It's because of you. I simply gave you the opportunity to shine." They talked for a while, the conversation warm and encouraging. When they hung up, Sophie felt a renewed sense of purpose. She wasn't just a customer relations manager anymore. She was a catalyst for change. The ripple expands further. As Sophie continued her journey, the lessons she shared spread far beyond the dealerships she visited. Her story was featured in business magazines, inspiring professionals in industries far removed from car sales. The man's wisdom, delivered through Sophie, became a beacon for others striving to create a more compassionate world. And though Sophie never saw the man again, his impact remained with her. Every time she looked at the gold watch on her wrist, she remembered his words. "Stay true." Would you like to continue with Part 5? Building a Legacy. Sophie's new role as the Customer Experience Ambassador transformed her life. Traveling across the country, she visited dealerships, conducted workshops, and met people from all walks of life. Her story resonated wherever she went, becoming a catalyst for change not only within her company, but across the automotive industry. Yet the deeper she immersed herself in her work, the more she realized that this wasn't just about customer service. It was about redefining values in a competitive, often impersonal world. The spark of an idea. During one of her visits to a bustling dealership in Los Angeles, Sophie hosted a training session for the sales team. Afterward, she lingered in the lounge, chatting with a young intern named Mia. Mia, bright-eyed and eager, asked, "Sophie, how did you stay so calm when everyone underestimated you? I mean, that must have been hard." Sophie smiled thoughtfully. "It wasn't easy," she admitted, "but I learned something important that day. People's judgment of you says more about them than it does about you. What matters is how you choose to respond." Mia nodded, inspired. "I hope I can be like that one day." Sophie felt a spark. She realized that while her workshops focused on professional behavior, there was a deeper need to address the personal growth and self-awareness of employees. The incident with the mysterious man wasn't just a lesson in customer service, it was a lesson in humanity. That realization gave her an idea, a program that would teach not only skills but also empathy, emotional intelligence, and self-respect. Pitching the vision, Sophie brought her idea to Mr. Brooks during their quarterly leadership meeting. The program, which she called the True Value Initiative, aimed to create a cultural shift within the company. "It's not just about selling cars," Sophie explained. "It's about empowering our employees to see their own value and the value of others. If they can truly understand that, it will change how they interact with everyone, from their colleagues to our customers." Mr. Brooks listened intently, his expression thoughtful. When Sophie finished, he leaned back in his chair. "This is ambitious," he said, "but it's also exactly what we need. Let's start with a pilot program and see where it goes." Sophie left the meeting energized, her vision now set in motion. Launching the pilot. The pilot program launched at 3 dealerships in different regions. Sophie worked tirelessly to develop the curriculum, which included workshops on active listening, bias awareness, and conflict resolution. There were also personal development exercises that encouraged employees to reflect on their values and goals. At the heart of the program was a simple but profound mantra: see the person, not the surface. Employees embraced the program with surprising enthusiasm. Many shared stories of how the lessons had impacted their lives, not just at work but at home. One technician said it helped him mend a strained relationship with his teenage daughter. A salesperson shared how it made her more patient with difficult customers. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, and word of the program spread quickly. Employees at other dealerships began requesting to be included. A surprise visit. One sunny morning, while Sophie was conducting a workshop at a dealership in Seattle, she received a message that left her speechless. The mysterious man was coming to visit. She hurried to prepare, her mind racing with questions. Why was he coming now? What did he want to see? When his car pulled into the lot, Sophie was waiting by the entrance, her heart pounding. The man stepped out, dressed casually but with an air of quiet confidence. He smiled warmly when he saw her. "Hello, Sophie." "Hello, sir," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's so good to see you again." "I've been following your progress," he said. "The work you're doing is incredible." "Thank you," Sophie replied. "But I owe it all to you. None of this would have happened without you." The man shook his head. "You give me too much credit. You had the strength and vision to turn a simple encounter into something extraordinary." They spent the day touring the dealership and sitting in on one of Sophie's workshops. The man listened attentively, occasionally nodding in approval. At the end of the day, he addressed the staff. "What Sophie has taught you isn't just for your careers," he said. "It's for your lives. Treat people with respect, not because of who they are, but because of who you are. That's the true measure of success." His words left a lasting impression on everyone. And as he departed, Sophie felt a renewed sense of purpose, expanding the impact. The success of the pilot program led to its expansion across all dealerships in the chain. Sophie's workshops became a cornerstone of the company's training model, and other businesses began reaching out to learn from her approach. But Sophie wasn't content to stop there. She collaborated with educators, nonprofits, and community leaders to adapt the program for schools, local organizations, and even prisons. The goal was to create a ripple effect, spreading the lessons of empathy and respect far beyond the corporate world. Her work caught the attention of national media, and Sophie found herself giving interviews, speaking at conferences, and even writing a book titled The True Value: Lessons in Humanity from the Most Unexpected Places. A chance encounter. One day, while Sophie was at an airport waiting for a flight to her next speaking engagement, she saw a familiar figure in the crowd. It was the man. She approached him, a mix of surprise and joy on her face. "We meet again," she said. He turned, smiling when he saw her. "Sophie, what a coincidence." They sat down to catch up, and Sophie shared the latest developments in her work. The man listened, his expression thoughtful. "You've built something remarkable," he said, "and I suspect this is only the beginning." Sophie smiled. "It's all thanks to you." The man shook his head. "No, Sophie, you were the one who took the lesson and ran with it. All I did was remind you of what you already had within you." As they parted ways, Sophie felt a profound sense of gratitude. The man had changed her life, but more importantly, he had shown her how to change the lives of others. The legacy. Years later, Sophie stood on a stage in front of a packed auditorium, receiving an award for her contributions to business and society. As she accepted the honor, she thought about the man who had walked into the showroom all those years ago. He had been more than a customer. He had been a catalyst, a teacher, and a reminder that every encounter has the potential to change lives. Looking out at the audience, Sophie smiled. The man's words echoed in her mind. "Stay true." And she had.